Another edition of Riding Home here on Dog Posting, Leggy Matt DeBerry. Matt, it's spring break. We're going to talk about some of your most fond spring break memories. But first,
Yeah.
let's hold on now. But first, there's guys that are on spring break, but they're continuing their work. Let's start with Brock Bowers.
Yeah, he's out in California, not surfing any waves. He had labrum surgery that was required. He had that last month. But he's out there working out. I was told by a very close source to Brock that he's doing his physical therapy. Georgia has a plan for him, working out each and every day. Obviously, can't do anything with his left arm, I believe, but he's doing some leg works. And he's back at the place where he trained when he was in high school, all growing up. Yeah, there's a reason he was outrunning defenses left and right basically every Saturday. It's because, we were told by someone close to the program that he's one of the hardest working guys on the
Yeah.
team. So it's no surprise that he's out there not enjoying his spring break. He's getting better, and we think he's going to be available by the summertime, but he's out there grinding, just working hard. I mean, there's no stopping that guy. No one's going to outwork him. And we see him out in California getting some workout in. And of course, there's a story over on Dog Post that you can read all about with quotes from a source out in California who told us what Brock Bowers has been doing this week. So the guy's an animal, best tight end in the country, and he's only going to get better. And he's not going to stop a February surgery from trying to become an even better player. So I'm excited to see what he has to offer as a sophomore next year.
Make sure you're picking up DAWGSTRUCTIONs down below. That one shot of Brock taking off right at me at Tech was he's just so fast. Matt, that's the issue, is you don't expect him to be this sudden, because this was a screen. I think that was
I
one
think
of
that I think that was a short little
short little dump.
inside slant.
Yeah.
I think, but he can take a screen the distance, and we saw them try to do that more often. But it's interesting, Dean, because we saw snippets and little flashes back in the spring game of, hey, this freshman Brock Bowers, he's actually making some plays, and then Clemson comes around and they're feeding him the ball early in the game,
Yeah.
and then it just took off from there.
Do you remember the way everybody was before the Clemson game, in terms of Darnell's not playing? So a lot of guys were out. It was Darnell, Keiris Jackson, Blaylock, George. Help me out.
I
Was
think I think Arian Smith was a little banged up still.
Yeah.
They
There
needed guys.
there were a lot of guys out, and they just kept feeding the ball to Brock Bowers. Darnell was out, as I said. Um, it was going to be tough for Georgia to score in that game because of their offensive situation and who they were dealing with Clemson. But they they should have scored more than they did in that game, and that's just all there is to it. Had we known a couple of things we know now, first of all, you can't miss 20, or it was like a 30. It was like a 30-yard field goal Jack
Yeah.
Pinesley left on the board. That matters a lot. And then the drive at the end of the game, they just took a knee when they were kind of wearing Clemson out. But yeah, you can't miss those kicks. But the guy had a great kick in the national championship game, so all is forgiven, I guess. But when you think about Brock and you think about the spring he had a season ago, but it was A.D. Mitchell. That was another guy that people were talking about, and he really showed out in the spring game. Hey, guess who made? I don't think it was the play of the year, Matt, but it was the play that got Georgia back on top to win the national championship. It was this play right here. D. It was. We got this in the book. Train. You ready for this?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Train DT red tank double go on Tuesday. Down 18-13 with time melting off the fourth quarter clock. Georgia was backed up in the second down due to a sack. They had thrown the ball down the field to get to the position they were in. Dogs needed to make something happen. Stetson made the call. Train DT red tank double go on Tuesday. A.D. Mitchell burst down the field and beat Kyrie Jackson 40-40 for a 40-yard touchdown. The Dogs were back on top for good. A.D. on top, that won the game, Kirby Smart told the locker room after the game. And AD had such a big spring game
Yeah.
that you thought you were okay, but you never can tell if guys have never played before. That was the problem with that Clemson game, was not knowing what was coming.
Yeah, even with all the injuries, I never thought Brock Bowers and A.D. Mitchell, two true
No.
freshmen, were going to be two of the team's leading receivers and make those type of plays in the national championship game as well. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously the catch AD Mitchell made was one of the biggest in Georgia history, but the biggest offensive drive in 40 plus years ended with Brock Bowers scoring that touchdown there. So just shows how good they are and the talent they're bringing in and year out.
Okay, two things. First of all, I need to write stuff down because I used to be accused of not letting you talk. Number one, could you imagine the panic before the Clemson game if people had known how hurt JT Daniels was?
Yeah,
That would have been some epic panic. And then secondly, you said the biggest drive. I think maybe this is a conversation for another time. So I'm going to write this down. Which
there we go.
drive was bigger, the AD drive or the Brock Bowers drive? And we'll
Yeah,
let people we'll talk about that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it would be the Brock Bowers drive, and we'll dive into this more and more. It's going to be a long off season and lots to talk about, especially with that game. But um, to have the confidence in those guys too. I mean, Todd
No,
Monken's drawing up
I know.
plays for Brock Bowers here and there, and he says, "Okay, if they're offsides, go to AD Mitchell, who's going deep." And they game planned so well, and they game planned around their best players, which is really what you have to do. You can't just put a square into a circular hole. You got to go to your best guys, and their best guys was one in particular, Brock Bowers.
The other guys that are working out, Matt, it was more tight ends, and I do want to talk about this just for a second. And we see this, often, but Eric Mitchell, Eric Gilbert is back at it. Oscar Delp, and that was Morissette as well, who was in there training
Yep.
with them. I mean, comments about Eric getting in there with Oscar and training during this. Every day is an important day for both Eric and Oscar Delp.
Especially with Brock Bowers missing the spring. These guys are going to get a lot
Yeah,
of opportunities,
that's
especially
true.
in the spring game and practice to show what they've got. But these kids could be doing anything they want. This is their time away from the school, away from the grind, and they're out there competing and getting better. And with Eric, it's just getting that weight down back to where it was, getting in football shape again. And it seems like he's doing his best to get to that point. Now, I'm still. I don't want to come out and say he's going to have this great year and make such a big impact because I still think he has a little bit of ways to go. But it's promising that he is with the team and he is trying to just get everything back together because, like you said, he's one of the best high school football players I've ever seen. And if he can get back to even a sliver of what he was just 2 or 3 years ago at Marietta, he is going to help this team a lot. But Oscar is another guy who I think could play early. They had three tight end sets out there. And when they had two tight ends, they were at their best. And John Fitzpatrick is not going to be there. Darnell Washington is a different type of tight end. He's not doing exactly what Brock and Oscar is going to be asked to do. So that's a position group that is the best in the country, as we saw last year, and it's only going to get better.
I want to mention this about Marietta. I've failed to mention this a few times, Matt. This is printed in America. It's not just printed in America. It's printed in Marietta. So if you're supporting not just Dog Post, but you're also supporting local folks in Georgia who are printing that book. That made me think about it when we talked about Marietta with Eric Gilbert, and we also are acting like he's a tight end, which he's not. I mean, at
Right.
least I immediately thought, oh, we're talking
Yeah.
about tight ends. Well, Eric's not a tight end. I'm going to talk more about Eric Gilbert in the future, but guys working out during spring break is not abnormal. We get to see it now more than ever before because of social media and so forth. But it is good. Oscar's going to have an opportunity to the tight ends at Georgia are not similar. I mean, Darnell is a monster, and Oscar's not as big as the other two guys. What's the difference there with all these guys to you? I mean, well,
Well,
Oscar's pretty big though, 6'5",
yeah,
220.
he's a pass catcher. He runs
Yeah,
routes. I mean, Darnell can you know, help you in the passing game, but when he makes a catch, it's contested, right? It's rarely is he open. If he's open, it's on a
yeah.
screen. It's not like he's getting open, creating separation on his own. Oscar can do that. He can run a route and get open against smaller, quicker defenders and make those type of plays. So um, if you play at Georgia, especially at tight end, eventually you're going to have to be able to catch the ball. We saw John Fitzpatrick do, he was more of a blocker. Darnell's more of a blocker, but they still got a few passes their way. And if you can catch the ball and make plays after the catch, you're going to get that ball more and more. So I personally think they need a little bit more help at wide receiver, maybe through the transfer portal. But they're going to keep throwing to these tight ends, and Todd Monken loves to do it. Todd Hartley's bringing in the best year after year. So I mean, they're just weapons. You can use them in a lot of different ways. And Oscar is someone who can help you block on the edge. But I mean, he's deadly after the catch. So he's another guy I think they want to get the ball to.
I think we still got a little ways to go with Eric Gilbert, but in terms of him just getting back to the way he had been in the past, and that's just what it is. But that's okay because he's got some time. With that said, there was a lot of movement in this offseason at receiver. Burton gone, Pickens gone. Those guys are gone, but you should still return Kieras, Eric Gilbert, who let's just wait a second. Blaylock, Rosemary Jack Saint, Smith if he's healthy, McConkey and Mitchell. That's not a bad group. And I just Matt, what do you think about where they're headed into the 22 season on specifically at receiver?
Well, we talk about all the time. Do they have killers? George Pickens, when healthy, was a killer. We see all these guys that Alabama pumps in, every year. Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle,
Right.
Jameson Williams. Does Georgia have that type of guy? We saw Ladd McConkey and what he did against Auburn. He did kill them. A.D. Mitchell made some killer type of plays, but can they do it? If you have to have a third down and everyone in the world knows you're either going to, one specific guy, can they make that play? I think they have a lot of quality defenders. I mean, excuse me, receivers. I'm not sure if they have an alpha like a George Pickens was, AJ
Right.
Green, that type. But as long as these guys do their job, Stetson's going to hit who he needs to. He's going to go with the guy who is open or has the. I mean, it's all going to be matchups, and I think eventually, they're going to take their shots down the field. But I do think maybe another veteran receiver from the transfer portal could really help them out. I would not say it's the biggest strength on the offense at receiver, but they have enough there to have another special season.
Yeah, and I think I mean I have been told very specifically not to raise expectations for Gilbert so that he can just like kind of get into the zone and do his thing. And I'm going to respect that because the people telling me that, the person telling me that knows what they're talking about. So let's take our time on Eric. But when you've got Bowers, that's problematic. And Darnell too. Those are guys that you can't match up with them. Those two guys, maybe you can match up with Oscar Delp. I don't know. I'm not hating. I don't know.
Right.
But with those two guys, they are really challenging to deal with. So your receivers don't have to be unbelievable. There's a lot of confidence about the offense coming into 22, but there are some areas where they're going to have to get going. Hey, look, make sure you're checking us out over on Dog Post. We'll see you on the website. Check out DAWGSTRUCTION. We'll see you there.